Those are some pretty cool highlights, man. I mean, he does a fantastic job. And again, it's all the credit goes to Tom, but again, those players making those exciting catches and tackles and everything else. It's fun to watch that stuff. You know, one of the big things that I'm getting blasted for is my large and small school rankings, so we might as well get right into that. They're not sponsored by anybody. Nobody wants to admit that they want to get behind this. They don't want to put their brand on this, but I will. Large school rankings after Week 8 are as follows. I'm going to go with the small schools first, Dick, if you don't mind. Number 10, Olean Huskies. The Olean Huskies make the list for the first time this year. Number 9, CSP. Number 8, Cheektowaga. Man, they fell. Number 7, Pioneer. Number 6, the Portville Panthers. Number 5, Albion. Number 4, the Wilson Lakemen. Number 3, from Class D, Franklinville, Ellicottville. Number 2, Western New York Maritime Health Sciences. And number 1, yet again, Southwestern the Trojans, holding on to that number 1 spot for our small school rankings. In the large schools, number 10, also making their first appearance, Grand Island, the Vikings, have made the list. Number 9, West Seneca West, the Indians are back in the large school rankings. Number 8, McKinley. Number 7, Lancaster. Number 6, South Park. Number 5, Orchard Park. Number 4, Jamestown. Number 3, Canisius. Number 2, St. Joe's. Number 1, St. Francis. And I'm sure I'm going to hear a mouthful and get an earful from some people around Western New York that don't like my rankings, but that's too bad. Do your own rankings. We'll see how people like those. But anyways, you got to have a little guts to put your name on those.
It's your top 10, small schools, large schools. They can also do a top 10.
Absolutely. I don't see any of the large schools, publics, beating those private schools. I apologize, or I'm not going to apologize for that. That's the way I feel. I just don't. I mean, Canisius lost. They lost to St. Francis, who's arguably, really is no argument, they are the best team in Western New York right now. Offensively, defensively, their line play. St. Joe's is right behind them, and then we're going to have an awesome game in just a couple weeks, St. Joe's and Canisius round 2. That's going to be an amazing game, any way you slice it.
Yeah, the best example, I think, when you're taking a look at the private schools, particularly the 3 big schools in League A from Monsignor Martin, is West New York Maritime is dominating every opponent. They're undefeated, and they're outscoring their opponents 3-1. They lost to Canisius 40-0. That speaks volumes related to the competition that Canisius plays during the course of the season, because they cannot get more games with Section 6.
And how about the dismantling that St. Joe's did of Bennett back in Week 2? I mean, it wasn't even close. It was never a close game. It doesn't matter who didn't play in the first quarter. You had 3 more quarters to get back into it, and you couldn't. St. Joe's absolutely destroyed Bennett, and that's why these public schools don't want to play the privates. It is a little bit embarrassing, and you could say the recruiting thing. I think some of it, sometimes it's excuses, and maybe there is some validity to it. We know there was at one point, but at some point it would be nice to see those privates play the publics. And, maybe if the publics put up a game, they would keep some of those players. Jerry Smith said it perfectly just a few weeks ago. If you run a good program, you treat the kids with respect, they're not going to leave. They're going to stay with you. Now, sometimes there are circumstances that, for one reason or another, a family has to, leave a certain area and they don't like the public school they're assigned to. Maybe they will go to a private school. That happens. But at the same time, how often do private schools lose players to public schools for academics, financial reasons, or it's just not a good fit? The public take a kid out of public school and put him in private. That's tough. I tried it. I went from a public school my entire elementary life to a private school. I didn't fit there. It wasn't a fit for me. I went right back to the public school. So it doesn't work for everybody. But you never hear a private school coach complain that one of their players left to go back to the public schools.
I think what I'd like to see is for the section to sit down with Monsignor Martin, particularly scheduling games for Timon and Cardinal O'Hara, and St. Mary's, mainly because when you just take a look at when they're having to play the teams in League A from Monsignor Martin they're not games. It's just filling voids in scheduling, and I'd like to see them be able to do that. And I think one of the biggest things too was Timmy Delaney every year played a Catholic school right from the beginning, no problem.
Yes, Timmy Delaney
Lost
went
his-
over and above
They
to
won a
play
state
those games.
championship.
Yes.
He was the outstanding defensive player in lineman, and then the next thing you know, he winds up at Timon. And Tim said, "You'll never see me playing again." So sometimes you create your own, monster.
Yeah, and honestly, I have no problem with what Timmy did. He did it for as long as it until you burned him. You burned him, and that was his best player. And I can understand Timmy's frustration. I was there when he first played St. Joe's that week, 6 days after the player left. Timmy was hot, and I think anybody else would have been too. And it was totally understandable. But Timmy has to do what's best for his program, and it's very rare someone leaves South Park, if at all. That might have been the only case. Kids love playing for Timmy, and that's why they're loyal to him and they stay there. It's very rare. And I think a lot of those coaches that have carved out their niche at certain schools, like Jerry Smith at St. Francis, Rich at Canisius, Mike Mamalotti at Will North, those kinds of guys, they've earned the trust of their players for many, many years because they treat their players the right way. They do things the right way, and it's very rare you see a player leave one of those schools. It happens, but it's very, very rare.